Some hungry chickens were pecking at their faces. In a gesture he thought of as gallant, the post commander found a patchwork quilt that had been looted from the Tunstall store and slung it over Alexander A. McSween's corpse, scattering hens. Then he headed for a hot coffee. Excited, jittery, and still electrified by the threat of death, the kid snuck back into Lincoln that night and stole cavalry horses for himself and Tom Folliard. Then they splashed north across the Rio Bonito to the foothills where regulators in hiding whistled to them. They congregated on a mesa, and each squatted with his soft horse's head next to his own, reins in hand, just in case there were soldier pursuers. A few partook of some kitchen rye. His heart still hectic with the could-haves of the murderous night, the kid even smoked one of Fred Waite's machine-made cigarettes just to see if it would calm his jangling nerves. Doc Scurlock read his Elgin pocket watch in the moonlight and announced, "Almost 3 in the morning. I was about to Siwash." Tom Folliard asked, "What's that mean?" "Sleep, old Indian term." Charlie Beaudry told Billy, "Real sorry we had to absquatulate earlier." Tom Folliard began to ask, "What's decamp?" Doc Scurlock said. "Hurry off. Leave abruptly." "It's just a word," said Beaudry, and returned to Billy. "We was sore tormented that they had that howitzer square on us, so we hightailed it, but we sort of made you boys the scapegoats." "Well, at least a few of us got through it." Because he thought it needed saying, George Coe added, "And the rest didn't." Heads hung for a while, and then there was some desultory conversation about their footing from here on out. Each recognized that the Lincoln County War was essentially over, and they were on the losing side. A seemingly petty grocery store rivalry had conjoined some cattlemen's resentment of John Chisholm's financial success and caused not only civil unrest and a number of murders, but the closing of both vying stores that were at the origin of the struggle. And now the regulators, with other options, were choosing to head elsewhere. The Mexican farmers to San Patricio and its outlying placitas, and the Coe cousins perhaps traipsing north to farm in Colorado. Fred Waite wondered about a return to his father's prosperity in the Indian territories, and Doc Scurlock and Charlie Beaudry thought they could rejoin the sisters waiting for them on the Rio Ruidoso in order to get their gatherings and hire on as wranglers on the Jingle Bob. It would be remembered as a war powwow. Franklin Coe noticed the kid's silence and asked, "You got plans?" The kid stubbed out the Pearl of the Orient cigarette after inhaling again, coughing and disliking it. "It's odd," he said, "but with the gun battle and risks and all, this is the most complete I've ever felt. So I guess it's not all over with me. I'm going to steal myself a living until I feel revenged." 18 years old, rootless and jobless, Billy Bonney fell into a drifting life of catch-as-catch-can, with horse thievery his main occupation. But first he went to visit Carlota in San Patricio just a few hours later on July 20th, finding her heating tortillas in a skillet in the family hacienda with her overweight mothers Sophia and Aunt Hortensia. Carlota shrieked with astonishment and joy when she saw him at the front door, calling him Chivato, the Mexican Spanish for kid, and running to hug him as she kissed him over and over again. "Así da gusto verte," he said. "So good to see you." She said she'd heard about the killings in Lincoln. She hadn't heard if he'd been among the dead. "Estoy vivito," he said. "I'm very alive." Her mother and aunt welcomed Billy into their casa like a prodigal son, but were not beyond urging some morning ablutions upon him, for he'd been a few days without benefit of so much as a cat lick. Returning from the yard pump, his tawny hair still wet, he found a feast of huevos rancheros and cinnamon churros. Carlota was as close as a coat sleeve to him as she said, "Mi madre te llama ojos brillantes." My mother calls you Bright Eyes. Ella piensa que eres muy guapo. She thinks you're very handsome. Me veo feo, he said. I'm feeling ugly. No he dormido. I haven't slept. Sophia heavily fell into a chair at the dinner table just across from the kid and watched him like his famished eating was merry entertainment. After he'd cleaned his plate, she asked, "Ya terminaste? Are you finished?" "Todo muy rico," he said. Everything was excellent. She folded her arms in front of her shelf of a chest, as if in the midst of a quarrelsome transaction. "Tenemos que hablar," she said. "We need to talk." In Spanish, Carlota's mother noted that the girl was 15 now, and therefore free to marry. She herself had married at 15, Tia Hortensia at 14. Carlota, she knew, pined for El Chivato. She no longer wanted to be just his novia, sweetheart, or even his querida, his lover. She wanted to be his desposada, bride. Carlota softly whispered in the kid's ear, "Déjame embarazada. Make me pregnant. Quiero un bilito. I want a little Billy." Carlota's mother overheard, but just shrugged as she shifted to the main problem, telling Billy in Spanish that she thought of him as generous, heroic, a man of justice, the enemy of their enemies. She was glad when she heard the kid was avenging the Spanish people, even if he was not fully aware of it. She said in the English he didn't know she knew, "We sees you one of us." "Pero?" he asked. "But?" Well, he was encantador y atractivo, enchanting and attractive. Little wonder that Carlota was in love with him. Carlota squeezed her arm inside his and tilted her sweet head on his shoulder. But he would not be a good husband or father, Sophia told him. Carlota cried in shock, "Mama, no!" Sophia had heard he was wanted for murder in Arizona and New Mexico, so she realized Billy could never rest, endlessly on the run and forever hounded, even in Mexico if he went there. She'd experienced American justice for the have-nots. Soon his name would be famous, and rewards for him would be posted. Would he live a few years longer? Yes, perhaps. But gunmen end up in coffins so quickly, and she did not raise her child to become a widow at 15, 18, 20. "Lo comprendo," the kid said. "I understand." There was more, of course. Carlota crying in a childish, passionate tantrum, and all three females yelling loudly and stomping and throwing their hands around. All during the dither the kid found himself thinking how tired of wild emotion he was, how very much older than pretty Carlota he felt, and how piffling and unimportant the caterwauling seemed after all he'd been through, the dying he'd seen, the kill shots he'd avoided. So he got up from the table, hatted himself with his sombrero, and quietly exited the casa like his feet were on hot coals. When she noticed he was gone, Carlota screamed, "Billy!" But she must have been restrained from running to him. And as he got onto his stolen cavalry horse, all that the kid could think was, "Another person subtracted."